I know that you are living in Grandview now, and what do you see as different now than what it was like when we were in school?
Really, there isn't very much difference, thank heavens. The biggest difference I see is that Grandview now is so appreciated. You know, now that we've had suburban sprawl and everybody's gone out and drives 45 minutes to get into work, Grandview is like a little gem of a little town 5 minutes away from downtown where there are all these wonderful things going on. And I think now it's appreciated. The real estate values in Columbus homes has gone up higher than any place else in Central Ohio. And it's being appreciated very much. But it still is a community made up of many, many socioeconomic groups, but they're all respectable. And it doesn't matter, your popularity does not depend on where you live, which house you live in. It's a very inclusive community, and it always has been.
Above the hill and below the hill, though, was a big differentiation.
Right. I don't think it has the thing it used to. I think it's all respectable. Actually, we moved to Columbus when I was just turning 4, when my dad was starting to work at Battelle Memorial Institute. And we rented a house on Parkway Drive, which was on the hill, just a few doors from the Stevenson School. And then when I was 11, my parents built their dream house at the curve of First Avenue and Arlington Avenue in Marble Cliff. So I have always maintained that I know every inch of Grandview because I went from there to there and walked to school both ways and had friends in all those places.
And we walked everywhere.
We walked everywhere.
We even walked to the stadium at Arlington High School for those football games.
We sure did.
And speaking of football games, what were some of the things that you remember doing after the games on Friday night?
Oh, we would go to rook dances. The Rook House was just within a short walking distance of the high school. And the Brotherhood of Rooks had a house. Has anyone talked about the Rooks? I mean, they had a fraternity house. And of course they didn't live there, but they had these wonderful sock hops. And we'd just walk over, and anybody could go. They were all welcome. And they would, one of the pledges would be playing records on a phonograph, and we'd be jitterbugging or slow dancing with a wonderful fireplace and a fire going and dim lighting, but there's always a pair of parents in the front room and Cokes in the kitchen and a pool table down in the basement. So they were very wholesome. And we would also go down to Grandview Avenue to Long's Drug Store, which is very interesting. Stoff's Coffee House now used to be Long's Drug Store, a big long drugstore with 2 entrances. And on one side, they had a soda fountain. So that was the place to hang out. When you'd been to anything else and you didn't want to go home right away, you'd go to Long's and go into the soda fountain and have a Coke. And it was right next to the place where you could see people walking in through the arcade. Yeah, the arcade. And that was wonderful. We'd also go to the movie a lot, the Grandview Theater. And if you'd been to choir practice or sorority meeting and stopped and had a Coke at Long's, on the way home, a bunch of us girls often would go past the movie theater, and this is on a weeknight when it wasn't filled. And one of us would go up and talk to Mr. Miles, the manager, and he'd let us in free to see part of a movie if we'd stay in a certain place and not make noise. So we saw a lot of movies.
Yes, we did.
And it was very wholesome.
And a couple of other places that we went after football games to get something to eat.
Oh my goodness.
Stu Harrison's.
Stu Harrison's
and
particularly. Jean's Drive-In, which is now Paul's, Fifth Avenue. And the Club Gloria later on, when we were a little older. The Lookout House, which is on the corner of Grandview and Dublin Road. We did. I love the fact that they have the tables that were Stu Harrison's. They were wooden tables. And guys would carve initials. You know, so-and-so loves so-and-so. They'd carve initials in these tables. You couldn't possibly write on a piece of paper in those tables because they were full of these holes. But they were sacred spaces. And they're now, if you go through that arcade, they're on exhibit, those tabletops and Stu Harrison's. And they had the best selections on their jukeboxes.
Yeah.
Very good selections. And good hamburgers. We thought they invented hamburgers. Yeah.
But We were very lucky to have such great places to go.
We were.
And lots of times we would walk to Arlington High School before the game, and then afterwards we would walk home again. So that was a long walk, and that made a long evening too.
Well, it did, and I remember my first real boyfriend, Jack Boyer, was on the football team, and I, of course, lived farther than anybody else up in Marblecliff, and I remember he had to be home at a certain time, and we'd be at the door, and he'd say, "Oh my, I have to run the 4-minute mile to be home." And of course, nobody had run the 4-minute mile yet. But we kept in good fitness doing all that walking. Oh, and sometime I got to tell you about my very first date, my first real date. I'll try to make a long story short, but this was so funny. We had just gotten into high school mid-year. We were mid-year students, and Richard Booth and Charter Merrill asked Betty Danks and I on a double date. I mean, a real date. We had heard all about dates, but this is the first real date. We were going to a movie downtown. And so the boys came and got me up at Arlington first, and then we walked clear down to Broadview, which was probably 10 blocks, and then over to 3rd to get Betty. And then we came back to First Avenue, caught the bus, went downtown, went to a movie, and then we stopped at, I think, the Purple Cow and had a soda. And then we got back on the bus. By now it was probably 10 or 11 at night. And the bus came back up, and at Broadview Avenue, all of a sudden those three got up and got off the bus. And the doors closed right away, and I was alone on the bus. And I remember thinking, well, I know the boys live down there near Betty. They don't want to go all the way up here. But I thought when you had a date, the boy was supposed to take you all the way to your door. Well, I had to get off at Lincoln and then walk 2 blocks in the dark home. And I was upstairs getting my pajamas on when there was a hurried knock on the door downstairs. And Mother got it, and it was poor Richard Booth. He had gotten off and thought I was getting off too. They hadn't told me their plan. And saw the door close and the bar taking off. So he had raced behind the bus all the way up, which took him about 15 minutes. And he was completely out of breath. And I wouldn't come downstairs because I was in my pajamas. But he told his mother to please apologize to me. We were all supposed to get off and take Betty. And then the boys and I were supposed to get back on the bus. It was endless. But the next day, brought to our house by Eagles Chocolates was a box of chocolates from Richard Booth for me for apologizing.
Did you ever go out with Richard Booth again?
No. No, but we were good friends. We were good buddies. That was so much fun. I think we were all experimenting to find out how you act when you go on a date. Oh, and the other funny thing was, I thought a date, I got all excited and borrowed a dress from my big sister, kind of a dressy dress, and wore hose. And Betty, we didn't get the memo together, and she wore her saddle shoes and a wool skirt, and there I was in a dressy dress.
You hadn't learned the art of discussing your wardrobe and your plans
No,
with
not
everybody
yet.
else. Yes. Oh, gosh. I know that when we used to sing with the trio, you would always be the one who would choose what we would wear. So what would you like to tell the people about what we wore in those days?
That's funny because years later when we got back together, she had taken notes of all the things we sang. I had notes of all the gigs we played and what we wore. Well, we usually tried to, I was the tallest, so I was in the middle, and we usually wore, we would reverse the top and bottom for me, the colors. That picture, you know, I'm in a white top and a black bottom, and you're the opposite, but we tried to look good.
And what did we normally wear to school?
Oh, the clothes in that time. Well, one reason I have always loved Grandview was because it's such a pedestrian walking community. You can see right now, if you look out on any street in Grandview, you can see the cutest dogs and the cutest babies and boyfriends walking along the streets. And we walked every place. And we wore, fortunately, we wore Spalding saddles with thick wool socks that were very good for your feet. That's not why we wore them. We wore them because they were the groovy thing to do. But how neat that we were so fit. We were walking all the time in these good shoes. We were really a very fit generation. And I do miss right now the fact that the bus doesn't come as often. The buses used to come every 15 minutes. And we'd pick it up on First Avenue, and then it would go down to Fifth and Cambridge. And we kids didn't have to have our parents take us places. We would take the bus on our own. We were very independent. And it was very safe. We would usually go in pairs or a bunch, but we'd go downtown shopping. We'd just take the bus. From practically ages of 10, 12 on, we could take the bus or walk, and it was very good.
And we were lucky too because we could take the bus downtown and go to a movie and see a stage show. And there were lots of stars who came to Columbus, to the Palace and the Ohio and the Grand, and they did wonderful stage shows.
I saw Duke Ellington at the Palace Theater. I feel so fortunate, the real Duke Ellington, and I was probably 14 or 15 and had a triple date to go down to a matinee because they would have the stage show and then they'd show a movie and then all the newsreels and everything and then another stage show. So we went to the matinee so we could sit through 2 segments of Duke Ellington, and I remember it very well. Joyous Cheryl sang, "I'm beginning to see the light," and it was wonderful. And after the second one, the guys who were all musicians, we always had good music at Grandview. They were all musicians, and they said, "Hey, let's run back to the stage door," and because they all go out for a smoke at intermission, and we'll get their autographs. Well, Duke didn't come out for a smoke, but I have Johnny Hodges' autograph. And anyone that knows anything about big band music knows Johnny Hodges set a real pace for the tenor sax in those days.
We were really lucky to live during that time. We were. What did you normally wear to school?
We wore sweaters and skirts. And when it got warmer, we wore blouses and skirts.
And on Friday?
On Friday, there was usually an assembly where you all go, in the auditorium and there's something special going on. So we usually try to shampoo and set our hair in pin curls the night before. We'd sleep on wet hair with pin curls with bobby pins sticking in our heads. I don't know how we did it. But we'd usually wear flats and hose or something a little bit dressier to school on Fridays. But normally, sweaters and skirts. Very, very healthy. Oh, while we were in high school, the war was over in 1945, and the new look came in about a year later. Now, during the wartime, you could hardly buy fabrics. It was all the stuff was going to the war effort. And they had, this fashions became very slim and short because it didn't take much fabric. All the suits had pencil skirts that were just knee length. And generally, shoulder pads, and it gave us a nice silhouette. It was very flattering. Well, all of a sudden, the hemlines dropped down to the middle of your calf, and it was called the new look. It was actually the clothing manufacturers were getting geared up again, and they wanted to use up they wanted everybody to buy new clothes. And I remember I just made myself a very nice white summer dress with a peplum and a keyhole neckline, and the new look came in just as I was finishing it. And my dress was too short. So I cut it right through the middle of the skirt, and I inserted 6 inches of this bulky lace that was very fashionable. And so it dropped down. I felt so proud of myself for being able to use my dress.
Because we all sewed. We had taken home ec in school, and so most of us made some of our own clothes at least.
We did. Yeah. And our mothers were wonderful.
Yes.
I remember my mother trying to make a strapless formal for me, and she didn't know how to make it stay up. So she put ribbing all around something tight all around the top. And of course that didn't do it, but you don't realize if it fits you, it's going to stay up. It's going to stay up. But that was fun. My mother was wonderful. If I wanted a dress for a prom, I'd see a sketch in a magazine and show it to her, and she'd make it. She could make things without patterns. And I learned to later. That was my major in college.
Oh. What about the swing assemblies, the wonderful musical assemblies we had?
Well, you know, I've said Grandview was so good in music. Even before Lowell Riley came, we were good in music. We had big bands in town, wonderful big bands, 18-piece big bands that played out at the Valley Dale. They played downtown. They played at dances and everything. And our sorority put on the Christmas formal and the graduation formal. And here we were, 16, 17-year-old girls signing contracts with big bands for a couple $100, renting the Valley Dale or the Crystal Ballroom at Downtown Hotel Room, and putting on a formal show. But two of the guys in Grandview were such good musicians that they were in the best band in town, Don Crawford's orchestra. And also Ziggy Coyle from the West Side and Gene D'Angelo from Linda McKinley. And ours were Billy Carpenter and Fred Taggart. And so when we had the swing assembly once a year, the PTA would probably pay them something. But we'd have Don Crawford's orchestra right there. And I remember hearing the sound of them, the whole band playing before we even got down there. You know, it was so exciting to hear that big band. And one year, a couple of us got to sing, not with them, but they started a jazz band at Grandview. And they played, and we sang as high schoolers.
And then there was the booster dance that was always very special too. That was held over Christmas time.
Right.
And the students were the floor show.
Right.
And
we
would
did a
have
lot of floor shows.
chorus lines that danced, and trios, and then the talent show, of course, was a great
Marvelous.
Showcase for
Right.
for fun. And somebody always played the accordion. There was always an accordion player.
Always. There was usually one girl from each class that took dancing lessons enough that she would learn a dance that she could teach us all. And we did, well, actually at church for the Bar None, Sybil Gramlett came home. She was a Rockette. And she came home and taught us one of their chorus lines, and we all made nifty costumes, and it was really something. First Community Church was very criticized for having a kick chorus line dancing in the church, but it was very wholesome. It was very good.
Today they have all sorts of fabulous things like the robotics team.
Oh, yes.
Which was, what, third in the world a couple of years ago?
I don't
something
remember
like
exactly, but I was so proud of Grandview High School for having a robotics team. Bill had a couple grandsons. His daughter Ann's family was living in London, England, and they went to the American school there. And they would fly to Boston to do the international robotics competition. And I was so impressed that little Grandview High School sent kids to Boston for that.
Yeah.
That is marvelous. A lot of individual attention. One thing about a small community like Grandview is everybody knows everybody. So it makes kids a little more accountable, I think, because they know if they really do something terrible, everybody's going to know about it. But that isn't always a good thing when everybody knows what's going on, but still, I do think that it makes everybody a little bit more friendly and neighborly because they know each other, and the kids, I think, are more accountable. It isn't perfect for all kids, but on the whole, it's wonderful.
And it was perfect for us, wasn't it?
It was. It was very good for me. Hey, thank you, Jackie.
Thank you, Diana.
Mm-hmm.